Well, hey everyone, you are not going to want to miss today's show. My guest, Rick Jordan, is a global cybersecurity expert, and he is going to share with you some scary and intriguing facts about how you can protect yourself, protect your business, and protect those you care about on your phone, on your laptop. And you'd be surprised at how vulnerable you are. So, with that, go ahead, enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button if you're here on YouTube or wherever you are, Spotify or iTunes. And with that, let's get going with the Susan Slide Project.
Welcome to the Susan Slide Project, where entrepreneurs rule, startups launch, and the side hustle becomes the main hustle. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Susan Slide.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, all over the world, I have a question for you. Do you have a smartphone? Mm-hmm. Do you have a computer? Mm-hmm. Have you ever asked yourself who's watching, who's listening, what's going on, how vulnerable are you? Well, my guest today is about to share some insight, and you're either going to leave this show feeling relieved, or you're going to be freaking out and maybe not sleeping. And I just want to disclaim that. Hopefully it's not the latter. We're going to give you some real advice today on how to protect yourself online, and also talk about what is this AI thing, and is it going to take away your job? Is it going to destroy your business? And my goal is that you're going to leave empowered as always. So my guest today, check it out. He is a media giant. He has appeared on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, the CW. I just binge watched a bunch of his interviews, so I'm like kind of a fangirl. He grew up in Chicago. He is, before the show, he was like, yeah, I was at the White House last year talking about AI. I mean, seriously. He is a podcast host. He is an author. He's a keynote speaker, and super cool. He's also an amazing father of three. So my guest today is Rick Jordan. Rick, thanks for being here.
Hey, what's shaking? I am excited for everything we're going to talk about today, because I love your calm tone too, and you're just like, hey. By the way, thanks for the awesome intro. But let's be us today. That's what I want to do. Because beneath all that stuff, you and I do a lot of cool things, but let's let some other people do some cool things and tell them how to do it.
Yeah, no, let's do it. Okay. Since we're just being real, a friend of mine said, "Have you seen the show Years and Years?" And on HBO Max with Emma Thompson. And Chris, my husband, and I, we watched it. There's 7 episodes. We watched it. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's done in the UK, and it takes place starting in 2019, and it goes all the way to 2032. And one of the features of the show is everyone adopting a Siri-like thing called Senor, and it's listening and they're interacting. And then one of the kids decides that she's trans, but not transsexual. She wants to be transhuman and get, different parts of her integrated into the global web and things like that. My first question for you is sci-fi or reality? Like, are you ever scared of who's listening, who's watching, what they know?
Am I scared? No. I have a deeper understanding of all of that probably than most people do, because I go into the real human side of cybersecurity too, even to where I'm going to be filming in a couple weeks in tunnels in Vegas for a new cybercrime documentary, because the dark web, we're talking like beneath the surface is really what I think you're getting at. Who's there?
Yeah.
Right? And that's still it's just an environment. It's kind of like the back alley where the transaction takes place, but there still has to be delivery of the goods. And that's what I'm going to be doing in the tunnels in Vegas, is actually going down there on some rescue missions for some kids in human trafficking. So from everyday people, though, because that's the real scary stuff, right? That's legit. That for everyday people who's watching, Apple, you said Senor, and I have not heard about this show or movie you were just talking about, but that made me laugh for real. But there could be a cool day, and I say cool because I see some good applications to this stuff too. When I say who's listening as far as Apple goes, they got in trouble just about a year and a half ago because they were transmitting, when you say, hey, Siri, I don't know if she's going to talk to me because I have my smartphone right here. But when you say that, they were transmitting those audio clips just plain as day back to Apple to be analyzed by AI and real human beings in order to improve Siri. And they were doing it without the consent or really telling people. It was kind of buried in their terms and conditions. So now it's front and center if you got a new iPhone 12 Pro like I do, or any new iPhone, as soon as you set it up, it's saying, hey, do you want to send the Siri crap to Apple now? Because they got caught. And that's kind of the ask forgiveness rather than permission thing that I do feel that a lot of tech companies, AI especially, are asking, or are failing to ask rather. And I'm excited to see what's to come, but I'm also a little cautious.
Mm.
Because I can see some days you see people, I remember I'm a musician too, right? And one of the most fun bands that I ever played in was with a bunch of people just for a send-off party for an 18-year-old dude who was going into the Army. And it was just a bunch of people that they know. We were all semi-pro musicians. So, I mean, we rehearsed 12 songs and we just rocked it because we had been doing this for a while. But the drummer had polio since he was young. He was like in his 60s now. The dude was rubber banding a drumstick to one hand, didn't have any legs, kind of reminded me of Def Leppard back in the 80s, right? How he was hitting pads for these things. But it's like, what if this guy had some serious bionic limbs? It would be really cool to give him that quality of life. And then even to the points where you ask how real is that in the future, I can see that it is. Because I mean, you're looking at even heart transplants, and there's even some AI that's going into some of the new artificial hearts that's pretty freaking impressive for quality of life again. But then you look at, hey, a Tesla can be hacked in 30 seconds. What can happen to those things? And I'm sure that's the case, that it can and it will at some point. So then it's just this circle going around and around and around again. And there's good people that I hope that will rise to the surface and say, well, wait a second, what if?
Yeah, I mean, starting that team and that mission about using AI and creating it for good. I think a lot of I love the point you brought up. It's like we're at a fork in the road. So there is AI, robotics. I just had my 11-year-old at the ASU robotics lab. Our friend Dr. Haney is down there, and they've created a Baxter, the hugging robot teddy bear. And we're talking about different use cases, like using it with autistic kids, teaching them how to emote and interact. And they had some other robots in there. And you can see, with the prostheses, so many good things. And then there's this whole other sector of, to your point, they're watching and listening, and working in AI as I do, amongst many things I've done in the past, including prepping the biggest rock band in Canada for tours, the Tragically Hip, which I used to do back in the 90s. Yep. That's a whole other story. But with regard to why Apple did it, was it, to the layperson, you might be thinking, oh, they're just evil. But they did it because you need massive amounts of training data to train these algorithms. So Rick, let me ask you, for the average person listening, watching, they've got their smartphone, they're doing business. What are some things they can do right now to protect themselves? Because can you go back and say, no, I don't want Apple to be analyzing my voice? Can you go and change your settings?
Yeah, you can. It's in the settings on your phone. It's in the privacy settings on an iPhone. Google's a little bit more difficult to find because Google is Google. And I remember, Terminator movies, right? I'm going way back now at this point, which I'm an Arnold fan, and it's great that Chris Pratt married Arnold's daughter. That's phenomenal that they ended up connecting that way. But I remember Skynet, watching this movie as a kid. I'm talking like 10 years old. And when Google came about, everyone's like, oh my God, Google is Skynet because it knows all. And at some point it's going to be self-aware. And I'm thinking, I don't know. And we're talking, 2005 at this point, somewhere around then. I'm like, that might not be the case. Maybe it could be the case. But you fast forward now to 2021 and you see some really amazing things. And will this be to the point to where these things become self-aware at some point? And I'm not trying to dive down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole, because let's break down what AI is real quick for everybody. You're talking about protecting yourself on your phone. AI is simply something that can, in the way I like to define it, is a computer piece of software, right, that can learn and act faster than a human being. And it's all data points. That's all that it is. Because you hear the buzzword machine learning. Yeah, it's just analyzing data. That's it. There's no consciousness that exists or anything like that. It's still real people behind everything that actually even control the data, right? I know you're an AI, so when you said that it has to learn, In order for Siri to be what it is, Siri has to learn. In order for it to get better, it still has to learn from across a lot of people. And it's kind of freaky sometimes to me how much it knows when I start talking to it, or when it does listen even when you're not talking to her. And a lot of people don't know that either. So if you really want to be safe, you can turn it off, and then you're not going to transmit anything. But yes, you can go back and change the settings on your phone for privacy later on. From a business perspective, there's a couple things on any smartphone that you'll want to do regardless. I was just talking about this the other day too. One, disable Face ID on an iPhone, which is the best way of security, because law enforcement can compel you to use your face or your fingerprint if you have an older iPhone.
Mm.
And if you have some things in there, like you're going through some things right now in business, I'm going through an IPO, I have really sensitive data that is transmitted, that's encrypted, and I use an app called Signal to transmit that data, right? If I am compelled to open up my phone via my face or a fingerprint, there's no fingerprint in this iPhone, then that data is exposed. But when it comes to a PIN code, law enforcement cannot compel you to give up your PIN code or a password or anything else to get into those systems. So even if it's in a case of a business, and it's like startups usually have more than one person that go in, right? I mean, even Zuckerberg had a partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Steve Jobs had Wozniak that was with him there. And those were not the most amicable splits when they happened. So protect yourself even against your partners. Make sure that you're not using those things, because when it comes to even a court order or whatever, they can compel you to release that data, but they cannot compel you to release a password or a PIN code.
I did not know that. I've disabled my Face ID and my fingerprint recognition just because I'm OCD and weird. I have a friend who's actually building an alternate internet. I said to Rick just
That's
before
fun.
we started the show, I'm like, I get to have these conversations. They're so fun. The people are, I'm shocked, Rick, at the number of people who don't even clear their browsing history.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm with you. Yep.
And we're hearing too in the news about cities getting taken hostage by cyber attacks. And
Yeah.
can you talk about that? I mean, someone listening or watching, they might have a business and they're wondering, how vulnerable am I? And what are some common sense things I can do just to protect my customer data, my, employee data? What are some things that people should be doing that they might not even realize they should be doing?
For sure. Ransomware is what you're referencing, is how a lot of these cities are taken hostage. And it's a lot of businesses, small businesses, startups, big businesses, how their data is taken hostage as well. So is it the city that's taken hostage? Kind of, because they can't function, right?
Mhm.
I guess for police, they can still drive around in cars. The fire department can still roll the engines if they need to, but they really can't communicate. And that's a huge part. I remember back in the days when I was a police cadet in my teens, because that was the first thing I was going to do, was law enforcement. And it was something that was just beaten into our heads, was never lose communication. This is the reason why we have radios. It was like, your radio is more important than your sidearm, because if you can't shoot anything, you can at least still call for help and radio what's going on. So in the case of a city, communications are cut off when some of these things happen. In a business, it's kind of the same thing. You look like you're dead to the outside world when your systems just get taken hostage like that by ransomware. Your customers, your vendors cannot contact you, and everything's transmitted mostly over email these days. And talk about voice over IP systems. If the whole system's taken hostage, and the server's not running, your phones don't even work either. So ransomware, the best way to protect against that is just get smart about the emails that you're opening and the links that you're clicking on.
Mhm.
And when I say it comes back to the human aspect, to get that money from a hacker's perspective, the tech is just a tool. But they're using phishing attempts. For everyone that's listening, phishing is just a spoofed email that has a link in it that you click on. It might look like it's coming from Microsoft or Google, and you click on it because it'll usually have some kind of warning or urgency to it. It says, hey, we noticed something weird about your account. Log in now. Or, your account was compromised. You need to change your password right away. There's typically some kind of urgency that exists in a phishing email. and it looks legit. It's got the logos on there from Google. It looks fantastic. You click on the button that says log into your account, opens up a page that looks just like Google, but it's not Google. It's a phishing site. And because you're moving so fast and you're already put in the psychological sense of fight or flight, because who's going to get into my email now? Who's going to get into my bank account information? Because I have emails that have bank account information that's listed in there. As soon as you log into that fake site that's using your Google email address and password, now they have everything. And most people will use the same password on Gmail as they will on their Netflix account, as they will on their bank accounts. That's just most people.
Yeah.
So the best way to protect against that is to make sure the email is coming from who it actually says it is. If you don't recognize it, just don't freaking open it. Or pick up the phone, call them. There's a concept, right?
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned this. I remember seeing the first email. So it was 1991.
Yeah.
And I was working on early facial recognition. I was in university and we were visiting these different universities we had partnered with. We were doing some cool crap, like building algorithms, early algorithms that would catch serial sex offenders. And so we were in
Awesome.
At this one university, and I said, I had this question, and the professor's like, oh, let me ask my colleague at Princeton. And I said, oh, okay. And I was expecting him to pick up the phone, and he types this thing in. I was like, what are you doing? He goes, it's called email. I went, oh, and in the old sort of phishing emails back in the 90s, it was like Prince Abdulabad, wants $1,000 or whatever. It's gotten a lot smarter. I saw some that came through one of my companies that looked like very much like Microsoft. Our COO is like, making sure no one's opening those things, but they can, to your point, look very compelling. Some of the interviews I've seen where you've spoken about how vulnerable people are, and I know a friend of mine, her mom received a phishing call from what sounded like the IRS. We need some personal information, and she actually gave it, and all of her, she had identity theft. I received 2 robocalls last week. I was laughing. That was like, this is the IRS. We need information. I'm like, the IRS is not going to robocall you. Could you
or
talk
the Social
about
Security Administration? None of those guys will. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about phishing calls and texts that people are getting too, because people are, especially people who are, say, 70 plus, they're very vulnerable because they're not so aware of this stuff. So can you talk about that?
For sure. And you're dead on that awareness is the biggest hurdle to overcoming these obstacles that exist in cybersecurity. That's why most of what I do is literally talk nowadays. I've got the, really, really smart people that work for me that'll go for the other stuff, but I let my certifications expire in 2013, because I got into, it's like people just need to understand what's going on. And of course, I'm the CEO of a cybersecurity company. We're going public, whatever. That's great. There's smart people that are doing a lot of the hardcore stuff, but still awareness is the biggest part. And if you're an older generation, it's great because my father-in-law always calls up and asks questions about this, and he's very progressive. He's always for getting the protection that he needs because he sees it. Could be because I'm around, possibly, but ignoring the elephant in the room is not going to do you any good. Thinking that, oh, you're too small, or you don't have enough assets, if you're in retirement or whatever it is the first step to saying, hey, come and get me.
Yeah.
You have everything that they want, and it's called cash. Because if they can send out these emails go out, and there's a difference between phishing and spear phishing. Phishing is very broad, and that means it's just the same email that's sent out to millions of people. They're going to get bites. They've got the statistics worked out. It's just like sales conversions. It's all about the numbers. However many people you hit means a certain percentage is going to bite, and then after a certain percentage clicks that actual link, another certain percentage is actually going to follow through and give you their email address and password or their account information. They've got this down to a science. But then if it comes into a corporation, and you might be 60, 70 years old, and you've built this thing up, you've had this business for 30 years, maybe 40 years, and overnight it could be gone. This happened to literally a neighbor of mine in the office park that we're in, came knocking on our door. And this was right after COVID hit last year. So it was like April. Funds are already tight. with everybody going to this. They're hurting because it was manufacturing. The orders aren't coming in anymore. And he knocks on the door, and it's like, yeah, I need some help. And I come, I'm like, his name was Jim, and I'm like, what's up, man? And he goes, we just had $100,000 just disappear into thin air. We wired it to this account here. And so time out, where did this request come from? Well, from one of our vendors. I'm like, cool, let me see the email. So he shows me the email, and it was the word ICE that was in the email. There was a whole bunch of different things. I'm not going to give away the name of the company here, but it
Sure.
ended with ICE. And the I in the domain name right before the .com was changed to an L. So it looked like at a glance that it was legitimate, and it had an invoice with that company's logo on it, with that vendor's logo on it, and said, here's the wire transfer instructions to pay this invoice. He goes, what can I do? And I said, dude, there's nothing. That's just gone. The FBI does not touch cases that are under $1 million. And the bad guys know that too, which is why they don't go after these big things. So even if you're just a consumer and you're $10,000, fine. That could be your savings.
Yeah.
And now you're done too. What kind of a bind would that put you in if you're not protecting yourself? And when I say protecting yourself, really educating yourself. There's plenty of articles that are out there. I mean, go to my show too. There's a lot of stuff that I talk about that's just basic things. It's not super technical, but just learn what's out there, because when you know this, I mean, a subscription to the Wall Street Journal is, I get an update every morning, right? The 10 things for me to read today, and there's always something related to cyber in there every single day from the Journal. If you pay that for $6 a month for the digital edition, you can at least stay on top of what's going on around the world from that perspective and learn the latest threats. And then you can figure out how to protect yourself from there. But the first step is education. The first step is awareness and just slowing down, making sure that those emails are from who they actually say they are. And then second guessing yourself if you need to send money somewhere. $100,000 right out the door. Stopped another client just 3 weeks ago from losing $258,000 cash. And they do maybe 10, 13 million a year, somewhere between then. But if a business carries, 5 to 7% cash in their bank account compared to what their annual revenue is, which is probably typical, that was like half their cash on hand.
Yeah. It's, Rick, it seems like common sense, but I love what you said, especially with the recovery, or if we're not recovering, or some businesses still aren't recovering to the point your friend, your neighbor at the
they're gone now,
park,
by the way, out of business.
Like
done.
People are so busy, they're so stressed, they're overwhelmed. They see something that looks like it's from a vendor, or they get a call that sounds like and what people don't realize, the common sense things, like you said, having different passwords for everything, encrypting the passwords, just if you get an invoice, pick up the phone and call that vendor and make sure. We received in Radius, we received an invoice, and I said to our CFO, I'm pretty sure we've paid that invoice, and he's like, oh yeah, we're not paying it. And he goes back and forth. And the other thing, if it is a cyber attack, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be, this is your domain, not mine. Generally speaking, they don't like it when you start corresponding with them to test them.
Not one bit. Nope.
No.
That blows. This is all social engineering we're talking about. And I love this because when I was talking with a friend of mine from the NSA, he likes saying it takes a lot of R&D to develop a legitimate hack, to actually brute force your way into a network. We're talking millions of dollars because it's organized crime. It's cyber crime. So when you spend that much money because it's a business perspective, and you finally get this magic silver bullet or a magic wand, you're going to save that for, like Putin's laptop or something like that. But you can get into any other business by just saying, hey, click on this link, because there's always somebody in any organization that will click on anything.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. And you know what? All of the people listening all over the world, guess what? It's not going to get better. They're just going to get smarter. And so you have to be smarter. Let's switch gears. As a tech investor, I want to know about your IPO, because this is so exciting. Like, seriously.
It is.
So when, what do you know? Because sometimes there's a date that you can say, but you can't say, or, what, tell us all about it.
Yeah, we're between 60 to 90 days out, and there is not a date that I can tell you right now because
Hmm.
I just can't tell you at this point. But yeah, that's where we're sitting right now. We just finished a successful pre-IPO round, and the reason for that round, well, first off, the whole reason for going public for me is acquisitions. It's M&A,
Yeah.
and because there's so few in my industry, because I don't know if you've heard of MSPs, managed service
Yeah.
providers,
Hmm.
but nowadays, I mean, it's when I started a decade ago in this, you had to put a lot of work into being a managed service provider. Now, because there's so many SaaS tools and they're great SaaS tools that exist, you could have somebody, which there's a lot of, I believe, coronapreneurs, as I'm calling them, that were internal
I love
IT
it.
people that now don't have a job anymore. So what are they going to do? They feel, and they probably should feel this way, that they could maybe start their own gig. That side gig is now their main gig because they don't have their job anymore in corporate IT. And that's cool. But they can go out and purchase a SaaS tool, and now overnight they're an MSP with no experience. Even worse, no liability coverage, especially from cyber breaches, because they're just trying to make ends meet. And I'm not even necessarily blaming them because I get it. I was that dude with newborn twins with no job when I started this whole thing.
Mhm.
But still, I did things the right way, the ethical way. From day one, I had liability and E&O coverage, and this
Yeah.
was even before cyber riders were a thing. I just had every possible coverage I could to walk in and say, "Hey, I'm legit." From day one, I had an office. So it just again to have some kind of a presence. Everyone these days, that's great. Work from home, all that. IT is even easier to work from home. But I like bringing clients in because they can see the studio I'm in, bringing prospects that can go into our situation room, as I call it. It's kind of a dog and pony show a little bit, but they can see that this is a legitimate operation. And those that are starting in this industry now, the whole reason why I'm acquiring is because they just don't know. And
Hmm.
most of them are performing without even knowing so, performing a disservice to other corporations or startups that we're talking about on the show, who's in the audience right now
Yeah.
listening, because they don't have the competencies to actually protect their client base. They're going to figure it out as they go, which that's what everybody did in IT 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's always, oh, go Google it. Somebody's got it out there. And while that's still true to an extent, there's still an experience perspective that you have to know what you're doing now, especially in the cyber area, because there's multiple different areas of competencies, even in cyber. There's infrastructure security, there's physical security, there's cloud security. There's so many different competencies. It's impossible for any one person to have that covered. So if you're a startup or even an established business, you have to work with somebody that has all of those competencies covered. So the whole reason that I'm acquiring others is to say, come underneath the umbrella because we have the competencies. And the best part, there is no nationwide brand right now or North American brand for cybersecurity. There is no dominator in the space. This is such a blue ocean, and the entire reason I'm going public is to acquire others to form exactly that and be a
Mhm.
dominator in the space. And when the filing happens, you're going to love to see who's on my board because we're gonna kick some ass.
I can't wait. I'll invest. I love a good IPO moment. It's going back for a second. What you said, I have friends who are doing startups. I
Yeah,
know they are not thinking about their cybersecurity. At Radius, of course, we have all the riders and everything
yeah,
because we're
yeah.
in AI, and our CTO came from the largest privately held healthcare database company in the world, right? So we started the company with the premise that, how do we protect ourselves? That was the first thing at the forefront, right?
Good.
But so many people don't think about that. So I'm excited. I'm excited for you. Let's finish up with some
Thank
rapid
you.
fire questions. I've got some.
Do
You
it.
ready?
Hit me.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm throwing the football. Go ahead and catch. Favorite scotch?
Macallan Rare Cask.
Oh, that's my
Well, that
husband's favorite too.
yeah,
Okay.
that's an everyday go to. If you want my absolute favorite, is Macallan number 6. That's like a $4,000 bottle.
Beautiful one. Yes.
Mm.
All right. You released 80 pounds on your journey. What's the number one tip you would give to someone who wanted to get healthy?
Nutrition. That's where it starts. You can think about exercise. It sucked trying to exercise when I was larger. It hurt everywhere. Now it's fantastic everywhere when I work out and I lift, but drop the pounds first. Just put clean stuff in your body and you'll get the best results.
Where in the world would you like to spend the last 30 years of your life?
The last 30 years?
Mm-hmm.
Holy moly. Wow, that's incredible. It would need to be somewhere in a major city. If I looked at it that way, I need to be around people. I'm not an islander. I never will be an islander. I can take little breaks and go off there, but when I move into that phase of my life, I see myself more as mentoring others and helping them do what I was already able to accomplish.
If you could give advice to this current administration on the economic recovery, what would you say to them?
Stop spending so much.
Amen. High five. Oh.
Let people actually have the opportunity to create their own reality.
Mm-hmm. Mine would be don't raise taxes on business owners, because naive people think that they're talking about the Apples and the Googles of the world. They're talking about all business owners and taking it potentially to a 29%. Even in Canada, the first 700,000 a year is only 15% in business tax. And you got to, this without small business owners, it's the heartbeat of the economy. So I second that. Well, Rick, Jordan, thank you for being here. Oh my gosh. I didn't even talk about, I spent 6 years rescuing kids from brothels in Southeast Asia. That's a whole other show topic. So
thank you for being amazing that way. That's incredible.
Yeah, you never know. I might show up in the tunnel in Las Vegas. You never know where I'll be.
Okay, let's do it for real.
Yeah, I'm there. It's a 4-hour drive from my house.
Awesome.
Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully the show has given you some insight into how to protect yourself, protect your business. Rick and I would love a 5-star review on Spotify, on iTunes. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, and guess what? I am the one, me, not one of my staff, responding to all your comments. So go ahead, share, like, give us a shout out. So with that, God bless, go rock your day, and we'll see you on a future episode of the Susan Sly Project.